I'll just leave it a few seconds longer. Well, yeah, I think sorry, you'll see me going up and down with my glasses here so that I can see the screen and see everything else. Croeso, bore da. Thank you very much for joining us today on our Children's Rights thematic webinar. And we're in session 3 at the moment. So today's webinar is entitled The Changing Nature of Modern Parenthood, as you can see from the title slide there. My name is Sue Layton and I'm chairing today. I'm the chair for the National Parenting and Family Support Strategic Leads Network. Catchy, I know. I've got to read it. And so that's where the idea for the webinar has come from. As we've all missed our conferences, our chance to sort of like see what's going on in the world. So I think this is an ideal opportunity for us today just to have a little bit of a catch up. So some housekeeping rules before we start. The event is being recorded and will be available afterwards for you all to have a catch up on the website if you missed anything. It says here your camera and your microphone won't be active, but I can see that everybody's camera is active, so I'll wait and see with that one. But if you do want to participate, please put any questions that you have in the chat as you go along. There will be an opportunity for questions at the very end of the session today. So if anything crops up and you think you want to ask a question, please pop it into the chat at that time. It gives us an opportunity to be able to collate all the questions and sort of see if there's any recurring themes. And we're really delighted. It's been really exciting to be part of this because we've had a chance to see, right, who's out there, who can we talk to? So today we're delighted to have a fantastic range of speakers and we're going to focus on modern parenthood. We're going to listen to all the speakers and then, like I said, there'll be questions at the end. There will also be a feedback form at the end that will pop up into the chat. If you could fill that in at the very end as well, much appreciated. Thank you. So we're going to start today with our first speaker, who is Anna Westall. She's my right-hand woman. I couldn't do this without her. And she's going to begin the webinar and provide a summary of the important role that parents play in supporting and defending children's rights. If I can send it over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Sue. Welcome, everybody. I hope you've managed to just quickly see in the chat. Usually when we run these webinars, both your microphone and camera are inactive. For some reason today they're not. Now, without appearing rude, if you possible, you could turn your microphones off and your cameras off if you're not presenting. It just makes it easier for us to run the webinar. Doesn't mean we don't want you to participate at all. We'd love to hear your questions. We just would rather you use the chat function for that today. Apologies, we're not quite sure what has gone wrong there. But yeah, as with technology, this does happen. But thank you so much. It seems rude asking people to turn their cameras off, but I hope you understand for the reasons for the webinar. So as Sue said, I am going to start the webinar off today. I'm only going to take up 5 minutes of your time. It was just important to kind of set the scene. As many of you know, Children in Wales is a children's rights organisation and we work very closely within the UNCRC. So I wanted to start the webinar today by talking about the UNCRC and how it links to parents and families. So just as a way of an introduction, we're going to consider how the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, or more well known as the UNCRC, applies to families and parents and the vital role they have in enabling and allowing children to exercise their rights. So many of you will be aware of the UNCRC and will have heard it mentioned in a range of contexts. And here in Wales, the UNCRC is embedded and is a core part of all policy and practice. The convention lists a number of rights, which are things that children should be able to have, and they cover a range of areas such as protection, provision and participation. The preamble of the UNCRC, which is like an introduction or setting the scene, really demonstrates the importance and recognition of the family. As it states, the family as the natural environment for growth and well-being, and that for full and harmonious development, the child should grow up in a family environment in an atmosphere of happiness, love and understanding. And on the slide, you can see in a bit more detail what the preamble actually says. The UNCRC recognises that parents are often the most important defender of their children's rights, and throughout the Convention there is explicit recognition of the importance of parents and the family to children. It's clear that the best interests of the child are usually served by supporting the child's family and those people and professionals and organisations that are supporting them. So, for example, children's health behaviours are influenced by the behaviours their family and community engage in. This can have both positive and negative effects on children. Parents who are physically active and eat healthy are likely to support and encourage these behaviours in their children. However, the opposite can also be true. So we can clearly see that the UNCRC provides a family focus with children at the heart. The actual word parent and family are mentioned over 50 times and are referenced in over half of the articles. Therefore, if we want to create a stronger, happier future generation, we must start with the family and provide them with the support and guidance they need. So how do we do this? I'm just going to draw your attention to two specific articles and how they highlight the importance of the family. There are many more articles that do, but I'm just going to mention two for today's presentation. So Article 3. Article 3 is said to be one of the most important articles in the Convention, and many other articles are related to it. It says that the interests of the child should be thought about at all levels of society and that their rights should be respected by people in power. Simply put, adults should think about the best interests of the children when making choices that affect them. And you may have seen this symbol in different contexts that's displayed on the slide. Ultimately, it supports the primary role that parents have in raising children, but also the role that governments and everybody else needs to play in both supporting children and their families. Article 5 requires the government to respect the responsibilities and rights the family has in helping children learn to exercise their rights and to ensure rights are protected. Government should help parents to help children know about their rights as they grow up. These provisions make it clear that children's rights are first and foremost protected within families, and that government should provide families with the support they need as and when they need it or it is required. Therefore, we can see that the role of parents and families play is absolutely huge, and it's so important. But parents can only do this if they are effectively supported and have the systems in place to carry out their role to the best of their ability. Understandably, there are times where families need more support in their role. You know, thinking about the pandemic and now our cost of living crisis, there are times when families really need support. It is therefore important that practitioners are also aware of the UNCRC so they can support them in their role and advocate for them. So I hope this brief introduction has just provided you with a useful overview of both the important roles families have in supporting children's rights, but also the vital role many of you play in supporting those families in their role. Thank you, and I'll hand back to Sue now.
Thank you very much, Anna. I'm having trouble with my camera coming back on now, but I'm sure you can all hear me. I don't know quite what's going on. It's not letting me. There we are. I think the gremlins are really in the system today. It's just keeping us on our toes. In the chat, Louise has said she will be sending the slides out to everybody. So keep an eye out. She'll send a link as well for the recording. So thank you very much, Anna. Next, we're going to hear from Ellen Ireland and Richard Batchelor at the Nuffield Foundation. They've been teasing us with this every time we talk to them. We haven't seen the whole presentation because they wanted to give us the opportunity to see it all together. So they're going to present their findings from their recent publication, Their Time for Parents, and that looks at the changing nature of parents in the home and is part of the Foundation's Changing Face of Early Childhood series. This series has gathered and reflected on the latest evidence on how the lives of young children and families in the UK have changed over the past 20 years. So really looking forward to hearing from this. Thank you very much, Eleanor and Richard. And Richard.
Thank you, Sue. Please shout if you can't see me or indeed my screen. I should be sharing it now.
Yes, we can see and hear you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sue, and thank you for Anna and Louise and everyone for inviting us along today. Sue, you've given me a very good introduction there in terms of what the series is. As Sue said, this is the 6th in the Changing Face of Early Childhood series. And this one looks at parents and the home. So important to be clear here that our project was focused on 0 to 5-year-olds. So this is our findings are in relation to parents with young children. Worth beginning with a quick word on who parents are. We know that there's a growing variation in family living arrangements in the UK, and we'll come back to that shortly. We're supportive of this inclusive conception, but it's important to recognise that policy and research doesn't always reflect this. So I will try and be clear, but quite a lot of our research findings, for example, are focused on birth mothers, for example, rather than a broad conception of step and adoptive parents. What we do know is that parents in all their diverse forms have a profound influence on their children's well-being and early development. What matters is the care parents provide. To understand how parents in the home are changing, we both wanted to understand how the care parents provide is changing, but also the context in which they do it. So some of you might be familiar with this Bronfenbrenner diagram here, where you can see that the child is nested within the family, community, and broader society. So this review looked at 5 of the most important proximate factors to parents in the home. So we looked at parental care, parental mental health and well-being, and the quality of the interparental relationship. We also looked at housing in the home and at family income. The review considered the latest evidence in relation to each of these factors, including what we know about how they shape the care parents provide and influence children's development, and what we know about how they've changed. For us, this was a really opportune moment. We know that through the pandemic, regular forms of support for parents and young children became available. Parents often became the sole carers of young children and home the sole place of learning. It's also important because we know that the UK government right now is thinking more about how to support parents through family hubs and the use of parenting programs. And that's something my colleague Eleanor is going to talk a little bit more about later on. So to start off with family forms and a little bit on parental mental health. We know that most children continue to live with both parents, but there has been a shift from marriage to cohabitation among parents. But there's also a much broader diversity in family forms and a much bigger appreciation. Blended families, repartnering, step and adoptive and social parents. We see the data suggests an increase in parental separation and repartnering. And we also have some evidence of rising parental mental health difficulties. This is largely in relation to mothers in the perinatal period, but we can see a rise in mental health illnesses. But we also have, beyond diagnosable illnesses, a greater appreciation of the pressures all parents face. Recent evidence from the Royal Foundation, for example, showed a very, very high proportion of parents of young children say that being a parent is stressful, that they feel judged, for example. So why does this kind of changing structure of families matter? Well, as I said earlier, what really matters is the quality of relationships. However, what we can see is that there is a sliding scale of resources where married families tend to have a greater number of social and economic resources to draw on, more money, whereas cohabiting have less, and then sole parent families have the least. We also know that there is a small independent effect of parental separation on child income outcomes. But as I said, what matters most is the quality of relationships, but also understanding the pressure parents face and thinking carefully about how we can support parents. What we do know is, as well, is that there's really limited data on quite a lot of things. If, for example, paternal mental health, very little information available. Also, as I said, very little information that considers the nuances of family forms. For example, non-resident parents, a father who does not live in the home, this conception that children only have one home, and that therefore the data might think that they only have one parent, when we know that this is not the reality that children experience. So how is parental care changing? Obviously, defining good parenting is fraught with difficulty, but we do have a much better understanding of the core features of good parenting. Sensitivity and responsiveness, appropriate discipline and limit setting, and positive home learning environment are all associated with better outcomes. There's a lot of discussion within government about changes here, about poor discipline, for example, but we actually have very little evidence to say whether the quality of care is changing. What we can see is how parents spend time with their children, and what we do see is that over the last 50 years or so, there has been a huge increase in the amount of time parents spend with young children on what is called developmental childcare. So that's activities such as reading and playing, which might be indicative of a strengthened home learning environment. So there's been a 250% increase between 1975 and 2015 in those. What we do know, and sorry, I've skipped ahead, and won't be a surprise to any parent, is that parenting remains highly time consuming. We can see from this chart here, despite the fact that we know that maternal employment, for example, has risen dramatically in the last few decades, that this hasn't resulted in parents spending a dramatic amount of less time looking after their children. So it remains highly time consuming and deeply gendered, with mothers tending to do the vast majority of childcare, despite the fact that minutes spent by fathers has been increasing. We've seen these trends continue through the pandemic, where mothers increased their childcare by 50%, and for fathers this doubled. Whether this trend will continue post-pandemic remains to be seen. I know today's focus is on parents, but our review looked also at the home, and this is, for us, this was a really important contextual factor. And since my first conversation with Anna, I have been thinking about this from a rights perspective. There is very little written about what good or minimum standards might be for children's healthy development, particularly in relation to young children. But we know that the home, both as a physical space, but also as something more intangible, emotional, really means a lot to young children and their families. What we can see is that there has been a really big increase among children, families with young children, in privately rented housing. We know that this is less secure, more likely to be classed as non-decent or overcrowded, and you're more likely to have to move. So that could mean a move in nursery or school, and can be quite disruptive to children. So that's a really important trend that I think is worth considering. Another really important trend within the home, and often overlooked as we do our wonderful online webinar, is digitalization. In 2009, only 23% of under fives had access to a PC at home, and now 83% are using a tablet, laptop, computer, or mobile phone. We actually know very little, again, about how digitalization is affecting things like, for example, the parent-child relationship, particularly during the early days. But we do know that it also offers opportunities for service delivery, as well as wonderful webinars. And lastly, from me, again, perhaps the most fundamental contextual factor is poverty. We know that poverty can have a direct impact on the care that parents provide, but also an indirect impact on the care parents provide through impacts on mental health, for example. What we can see is that the children in families under 5 are the most likely to be in poverty, and we know that the proportion of children in poverty in families with youngest child under 5 has increased from 30% in 2013 to 14 to 36% in 2018-19, and we expect that those trends will accelerate through the cost of living crisis. I will hand over now to my colleague Eleanor, who will tell you a little bit more about the support parents say they need, as well as what we know about the efficacy of programmes to support parents. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Richard. So as part of our review, we looked at the data about what kind of support parents actually need. Now, it seems funny telling you all of this because this is not going to be news to any of you at all. But in a survey carried out for the Royal Foundation, they found that parents need help most often with things like their children's health and nutrition, their behaviour and their sleep. And remember, this is parents of 0 to 5-year-olds. And unsurprisingly, they turned most frequently to their friends and their family, to the NHS, including health visitors, and less often to childcare professionals. Now, we know that there's been an increase in the amount of support available for parents online, and there's been a massive expansion of online support during the pandemic. But the internet and parenting blogs before the pandemic were used a lot less frequently than other sources of support. So we really need to know how effective this increase in online support for parents has been. Now, we also know that support for parents is really important when they're navigating more challenging times. So, for example, when parents themselves might be experiencing mental health issues, or at crucial transition points in families' lives, such as the first time they become a parent, or when their child starts school. So beyond the support offered by friends and family and healthcare professionals and early years providers, there's a range of parenting programmes available to support parents of young children, and we've chosen to focus on them here, partly because at the Nuffield Foundation we funded quite a lot of work on evaluations of parenting programmes, but also because of the additional investment in support for parents that the UK government is going to be making through family hubs in England. It's around 300 million for 75 upper tier local authorities. And so we're clear what we're talking about when we refer to parenting programmes. They often include a quite specific set of activities, which is delivered by someone who's trained in that particular programme over a set number of weeks or months. And they're designed to benefit a particular group of parents or children with a view to supporting a specific need that those parents or that child might have. And I just want to acknowledge the work of the Early Intervention Foundation here, who've done a lot of work about evidence-based parenting programmes, which we've drawn on very heavily. And the definition of a parenting programme that we've got on the slide here is a paraphrase of the definition they use in their 2016 Foundations for Life report. Now, programmes for parents vary depending on the types of need that they're focusing on. So, for example, attachment or behaviour, cognitive development or relationships between parents. And in many cases, programmes would cover more than one area of need. And the level of need that programmes also address varies from programmes that are available to all families, so universal programmes, to programmes that target families based on particular risk factors that family might have, or where a particular need has been identified for that parent or those children. Now, who delivers a programme again varies depending on the level of need and the type of need being addressed, but as well as specialists and practitioners who've been trained to deliver the programmes, in some cases they're delivered by other parents or volunteers, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And of course, different programmes are delivered in different formats. For example, one-to-one at home or in groups at community settings like childcare providers. And there's been an increase in the amount of programmes being delivered online as a result of the pandemic. If we go on to the next slide, please, Richard. Thank you. So, parenting programmes, do they actually work? Well, the quick answer is that some of them do. And there are programmes with evidence of being able to improve both parenting and children's outcomes across a range of measures. And the best place to find out information about these programmes is the Early Intervention Foundation's guidebook, which has details of lots of programmes for parents with young children, including the evidence available about how effective they are. Now, there's high quality, robust evidence, and when I say that, what I mean is from a randomised control trial or a quasi-experimental design. So there's high quality, robust evidence of the efficacy of programmes across a range of different needs. So, for example, family nurse partnerships has got evidence of improving children's attachment, parents' responsiveness, children's early cognitive skills and their behaviour and later educational outcomes. Incredible Years Preschool has got evidence of improving children's disruptive behaviour and antisocial behaviour, their reading ability and levels of parental warmth. Let's Play in Tandem has evidence of improving children's language development and early math skills. And Enhanced Triple P has got evidence of improving children's behaviour and has shown reductions in dysfunctional parenting. One thing to note is that there are fewer programmes for parents of young children which have high quality evidence of improving children's cognitive outcomes compared to other areas of needs, but there are some. Now, this doesn't mean it's not possible to improve young children's cognitive outcomes through working with parents, but it does mean that we don't yet have as much evidence on these programmes as we do on those that are focusing on other areas of need. And there are a lot of programmes that are currently under evaluation at the moment. And I really want to highlight the importance of robust evaluation of these interventions, and that all programmes need to go through many stages of evaluation before we can say that they have evidence of having an impact on children's or parents' outcomes. There is a growing body of evidence about parenting programmes, but it is still an area in development, and we still need to understand a lot more about how they work and about what makes them effective. And these are some of the things that we need to know. So there's some evidence that some groups of families are underserved by the interventions that are designed specifically to support them. And there's evidence that families who are at risk of poverty, families from minority ethnic groups, and families who do not have English as their first language might be facing additional barriers to taking part in programmes designed to support them. One example of a programme that was able to deal with some of these barriers and to be more accessible is Empowering Parents, Empowering Communities. Now, this programme used a peer-led approach, so the programme is delivered by local parents who are trained as peer facilitators. And it was found to have very high levels of completion, so the majority of parents completed the whole course. And it was also shown to have an improvement in children's behaviour and parents' skills. There are other programmes, though, that have really struggled with the peer support model, so it's useful to know more about when these types of peer support models can work best and where delivery by specialists or by trained practitioners might be more appropriate. Another key question to consider is when to provide support for parents with young children, and there are a couple of things to think about here. It could be that key transition points, such as becoming a parent for the first time or starting school or parental separation, are times when receiving additional support might be most impactful. And then there's also the timing of the delivery of the programme itself. And some researchers and programme developers are considering whether top-ups or boosters following a programme being completed might be useful to help embed longer-term outcomes. Now, related to the timing of the programme is the intensity of it, so how frequently it's delivered and over how many weeks. And this, of course, relates to how much it costs. In a review of programmes in 2016, the Early Intervention Foundation found that none of the programmes that had evidence of improving children's cognitive development were low cost, which suggests that there aren't any quick fixes, but there is a lot of interest in lower intensity interventions, particularly during sort of austerity and cost of living crisis. So we really need to explore if and how these lighter touch programmes can be effective in supporting parents. Finally, where programmes take place is a key issue to consider. Now, of course, different types of programmes are better suited to being delivered in groups or one-to-one or in community settings or at home. And this depends on a lot of factors like how old the children are and the type of issue that's being addressed. One of the areas, as we've mentioned already, that we need to know more about at the moment is how effective programmes that are delivered digitally or online are. Lots of programmes move from being delivered face-to-face to being delivered online during the pandemic. And there's definitely some advantages to this. So they're much cheaper to deliver. They might be more accessible to some parents. There's some discussion it might be more accessible to dads who can possibly access programmes in the evening, who might not be available in the daytime. But we don't yet know much about how online delivery works and how it compares to sort of face-to-face delivery of programmes. And there is some concerns that you might well lose some of the things that make these programmes effective by moving online. Now, there's a couple of issues to consider about the evaluation of programmes for parents that I'm going to quickly mention as well. Most programmes have the ultimate aim of trying to support children's development, and they try and do this through the effects of improving parenting and how parents interact with their children. But we found that it wasn't uncommon that a particular programme would be successful in improving parents' skills or the home learning environment, but then the anticipated effects on children's outcomes weren't seen. And there's lots of possible reasons for this. It could be that the changes in children's outcomes take longer to come about than the duration of the study. So it's that there is going to be an effect on improving children's development, but it's just going to be a little bit later down the line. But it also could be that sometimes these programmes aren't intensive enough to affect children's outcomes, or it could be that the programme is working just fine, but there's really high rates of dropout from the study. So often we don't really know, but whatever the reasons are, it's really important when we're evaluating interventions to ensure that they're designed in a way that we can actually understand what's going on. We can understand why sometimes they're only partially effective or don't have the effect on children's outcomes that's anticipated. Now, there's also a lack of evidence about the longer term effect of these programmes. Whilst there are a reasonable amount of programmes with evidence of impact on children's outcomes in the short term, so sort of immediately after the programme's been completed, there are fewer where longer term outcomes have been measured. So it's really important to consider and fund evaluation of the longer term effects of these programmes. There are a couple of exceptions to that. So family nurse partnerships and Incredible Years that I mentioned earlier have had longer term evaluations, and they have been shown to improve children's and parents' outcomes in the longer term. Now, parenting programmes are, of course, as you all know, just one very small part of the picture about how we can support parents of young children. And between pregnancy and the age of 5, parents and children will receive support from a huge range of different services. And how we can join up support for parents of young children isn't a new discussion at all, and it's one that's still vitally important. We know that support for parents of young children is really fragmented from research that Nesta have done, and it varies a lot depending on where you live. Sure Start Children's Centres, of course, represented one of the most comprehensive attempts to integrate support for parents of young children. And whilst the package of support changed over time and varied a lot in terms of what was offered to parents between different local areas, we do know that there was evidence of a range of good practice offered to parents, and some areas used evidence-based parenting programmes. And the evaluations of Sure Start have shown that there were benefits in terms of outcomes for children and parents who use the centres, and longer term benefits for children's health. So initial evaluations showed that there were improvements in children's social development and their behaviour. There was reduced negative parenting behaviours and improvements in the home learning environment. And later evaluations have shown reductions in hospitalisations throughout childhood and adolescence for children who lived in Sure Start areas. And the positive effects of Sure Start were associated with the frequency of use, the extent to which there was inter-agency working, and the number of evidence-based programmes that were used in the centres. So there's clearly evidence that integrating support for families is really important. But of course, the number of children's centres has massively fallen over the last 10 years. And in England, family hubs are being introduced, which do aim to offer integrated support for parents, although they are going to be quite different from Sure Start Children's Centres. We know that they're going to comprise an offer of universal integrated support for families, similar to Sure Start, and this may include links to early childhood education and care, mental health support, links to health visitors and parenting programmes. But they are going to differ from Sure Start in that the focus will be on a much wider age range, and the services won't necessarily be provided from a dedicated centre. In some areas, they may well be provided from an online centre. But it does, however, offer a renewed interest in support for parents in England and an opportunity to create a more coherent offer if it's backed by sufficient investment. So it's definitely one to watch and to see how it goes. OK, thank you very much for listening to us. That's our whistle-stop tour of some of the evidence about parents and parenting. I think we're going to be having questions at the end, so I'm going to hand back over to Sue now. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much, Eleanor. Really interesting to hear all that, and I think there's a lot of where our work is based on. It'll be really interesting to read the full findings as well. I think that's something that we all should invest our time in. If you've got any other questions, please pop them into the chat. I've seen just a couple, but if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask Richard and Eleanor, please remember to pop them in the chat for the end of the session, and then we'll get back to you at the end. Thank you very much. So we're now going to hear from Kim Jones, who's a specialist health visitor in perinatal mental health, and she's going to focus on the mental health of fathers in the perinatal period. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll just load it here for you now. Yeah, is that okay? So everybody can
yes, it's coming through now.
Lovely. Hi,
yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. My name's Kim Jones, and as Sue said, I'm the specialist health visitor for perinatal mental health for Cardiff and the Vale of Glamorgan. I've been asked to give a brief background on the impact of mental health on fathers in the perinatal period, and my presentation today is based around training delivered by the Institute of Health Wisdom. So why do fathers matter? I think we need to say that first of all. So ensuring the health and well-being of families with young children is the foundation of a healthy society. Perinatal mental health has a significant impact not only on the sufferer but also the whole family. This is particularly concerned for the developing infant who needs good quality contacts to ensure optimum social and emotional development. One of the recent health awareness successes has been the focus on maternal mental health in the perinatal period and the potential effect poor maternal mental health can have on the fetus and the infants. Maternal mental health is now high on many political agendas, and there's a broad portfolio of national clinical guidelines, research and policies for professionals to draw from. Conversely, the mental health needs of fathers are often neglected, inadequately understood and poorly addressed. Yet we know that research tells us the important role fathers play in the growth and development of their infants and children, that fathers are often unaware of the possibility of perinatal mental health challenges and can find seeking help challenging. They may feel pressured to be the rock or the provider as opposed to recipients of support. And we know that a significant number of fathers do actually suffer from poor mental health in the perinatal period, and that the father's mental health can affect the child's behaviour, social, cognitive and emotional development, and has been associated with some adverse child developmental outcomes. So why should we work and support fathers? There's been an increasing focus on the earliest years of life. However, comparatively few studies have addressed the roles of fathers, despite there being an association, as we said before, with child behaviour development. It's thought that some of the mechanisms in which the father's mental health influences their offspring are genetic, such as conditions of schizophrenia or bipolar, environmental, for example, the impact of depression on a father and their ability to interact with their children, or a mixture of both with gene environment interplay. Other factors include the age of the child. There's a recognised greater effect on older children, and the sex of the child, with boys being more vulnerable than girls. The children of fathers who are involved in a nurturing relationship with them show greater empathy, have higher self-esteem, have better relationships with their peers and in their future, achieve higher educational outcomes, and have fewer behaviour problems and lower criminality. We know that undiagnosed and treated mental ill health in fathers can have an impact on their children's. Parental mental illness can affect their child's behaviour, social, cognitive and emotional development. And a study by Ramchandani showed that severe depressions in fathers is associated with very high levels of emotional and behaviour problems in children aged 3.5 and in particular boys. Fathers suffering from depression may not have the capacity to engage and be involved with their child's education, which can have a strong negative impact on their final educational achievement. And that children with two depressed parents are at an even higher risk of poor developmental outcomes. We also understand that depressed mothers are more likely to turn to their partners for support. that perceived support from the baby's father is strongly correlated with lower rates of depression in women in the perinatal period. Well fathers can act as buffers, protecting the child from any negative effects of the mother's depression. The father's support has been found to shield the infants of chronically depressed mothers from negative outcomes. Fathers' attitudes and behaviours play a significant role in the mother's decision to breastfeed. Where fathers are supportive of breastfeeding, it's more likely to be successful. In particular, low-income women suggest that the male support is crucial in their decision to finally breastfeed. Involved fathers can also reduce stress for the mother in pregnancy and as such contribute to a positive nurturing environment for the developing fetus. And for the fathers themselves. Fathers who are highly involved in caring for their babies and children live longer, have higher levels of satisfaction in midlife. They show activation of brain networks linked to emotional processing and social understanding, have fewer physical health problems, are less likely to abuse drugs. They develop greater commitment, attachment and responsiveness to their children, and have fewer mental health problems. It's thought that some of this may be due to the hormone changes men experience before their babies are born. We know that women's testosterone levels increase during pregnancy, and this is thought to play a part in maintaining the pregnancy and the stimulation of birth. However, men who've become fathers have been shown to have lower testosterone levels than men that don't become fathers. And it's thought that this decrease in testosterone supports the father's care by reducing aggression, reducing their desire to procreate, and promoting and enabling paternal attachment of their new baby. Studies have found that fathers are as capable as mothers at responding sensitively to their child's needs. The majority of children will have established an attachment relationship with their father by the time they are 8 months old if the father is living with them. A study by the Fatherhood Institute in 2014 highlighted the following information around the father's relationship with their children. Men's hearts race just as fast as the women's when they hear their baby scream. Fathers can recognise their own influence blindfolded just by touching the baby's hand after only an hour spent cuddling their new baby. When a man bottle feeds an infant, he does so just as sensitively as a woman, and the baby drinks the same amount of milk. The quality and quantity of baby-father contact has a direct impact on how secure children feel growing up. Children who spend more time playing with their dads are more likely to be sociable when starting school. Babies with strong attachments to their dads tend to have fewer behaviour problems later on. And substantial father involvement from at least the first month after birth promotes better language development, better cognition skills, and ultimately higher IQ scores. Fathers are vulnerable to a range of mental health problems in the perinatal period. Literature is often focused on depression. However, research suggests that anxiety may be the most common mental illness experienced by fathers. Problems that men can experience can include depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorders, stress, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar, and psychosis. Fathers report that pregnancy is the most demanding period of their psychological reorganisation of self, and according to an NCT study, more than 1 in 3 new fathers are concerned about their mental health. Overall, rates of mental illness is thought to be around 9%. However, these rates rise to 50% if their partners experience mental illness in the perinatal period also. It's important to remember that this level of mental health difficulties in fathers is the level that we know about. We can assume that there's significant underreporting and underdetection. Healthcare practitioners who fathers often come into contact with in the perinatal period are ignoring or failing to ask questions about the perinatal mental health of men. This is really concerning and problematic, considering that we know that men are also less likely to seek help for mental health problems, so they're often going undetected and unsupported. Stress can be an umbrella term used by men for a number of emotional and mental health difficulties, including some of the more severe conditions. Darwin et al. In 2017 interviewed 19 fathers for a study who'd experienced symptoms of poor mental health. They found that fathers had difficulty acknowledging their feelings, referring to their poor mental health as stress rather than depression or anxiety. They felt they did not have a right to feel down and believed that they were not entitled to look for support from health and social care professionals. They experienced considerable guilt as they felt they were letting their partner and their baby down. The estimate from studies in relation to prevalence and incidence of perinatal anxiety and depression in fathers varies hugely. However, what we can assume is that this is due, as stated previously, to underreporting. A systematic review of 43 papers reported the prevalent rates for any anxiety disorder in men ranged between 4.1 and 16% during the antenatal period and 2.4 and 18% during the postnatal period. Estimates of depression in fathers vary significantly, ranging from 1.2 to 25.5%. The peak time for father's depression is between 3 and 6 months after the baby's birth, and that first-time fathers may be particularly prone to depression, with mild to moderate depression the most likely. And finally, it's important to remember that when supporting fathers, anxiety and stress frequently coexist with depression in pregnancy and the postnatal period in men. We need to talk about suicide in men. Males are 3.3 times more likely to die by suicide in Wales than females, with men aged 45 to 49 being the highest age-specific rate. It's the single leading cause of death in males under the age of 50, and these statistics are the same across the whole of the UK. So just a few facts about suicide in men. Men from the lowest social class living in the most deprived areas are up to 10 times more likely to end their lives by suicide than those in the highest social class. There's a well-known link between unemployment and suicide. Unemployed people are 2 to 3 times more likely to die by suicide than those in work, and that suicide increases during an economic recession. Personality traits and psychiatric illness, particularly depression, underlies many suicides, but only a minority of those who have mental health problems will take their own life. Relationship breakdown is more likely to lead men rather than women to suicide, and men are more likely to be separated from their children, which can also play a role in some men's suicides. And generally, many men across all social classes are reluctant to talk and seek help about their emotions and mental well-being. It's important to mention as well maternal suicide. This is one of the leading causes of direct maternal deaths occurring within the first 6 weeks after the end of pregnancy, and remains the leading cause of death within a year after the birth of a baby. As professionals working with parents in this period, we need to be confident that talking to a person about suicide will not make them suicidal. Talking openly and responsibly about suicide will let the parent know that they do not have to be alone and that there is help available. Fathers may be unintentionally marginalised by service and by the maternal focuses on practices surrounding new babies. Men are often feel their questions are ignored by midwives, while health visiting is perceived as a service provided by women for women. There is unfortunately still a stigma attached to mental health, and many fathers do not want to be given this label. Fathers may be reluctant to seek help from their health professionals about their mood state, as they do not want it recorded, as fear it will affect employment or that it will detract from their partner's needs. Before practitioners can work effectively with fathers, they need to be able to make contact with them to develop a good relationship. It's therefore important that routine universal services in the antenatal and postnatal period are addressed to both parents, to mum and dad. So what do fathers want? Research tells us that fathers want a range of resources in a variety of sources, and they want to know what support is available for both parents and not just mothers. Specifically, resources could be targeted to fathers, informing them about the challenges of fatherhood, breastfeeding, and the possibility of mental health struggles. Evidence around mental health needs to be tailored to men and framed around fatherhood rather than the mental illness, focus on stress, resilience, fatherhood and behaviours, and aligned to men's self-care with their role as a supporter and a protector. Men also benefit from men-only sessions at times when they are available. Many centres, children's centres offer Saturday morning dad groups, and I know they're going to be talking about that afterwards. And we need to educate fathers about child development, how their baby is growing and how they can help their child to develop. Men are often fascinated by the science behind brain development. We need to encourage new dads to spend time with their children and help them to see how rewarding engaging with a baby can be. We need to reinforce those positive father-infant relationships. We need to educate both mothers and fathers about perinatal mental health so they can access help if they notice any signs and symptoms in themselves or their partners. If the mother is mentally ill, then we need to ensure that the father has adequate support systems in place, as maternal mental health problems, as you said previously, increases the risk of depression in the father. We need to assess father's mental health and well-being as well as the mother's at visits when dad is present. It can simply be, how are you feeling? We then need to enable and support fathers to seek help if they are suffering from perinatal mental health problems. This can be online, self-help or male-specific groups. Men often just want to dip into a group for help when they need it. An important opportunity for preventing problems is the identification in the perinatal period. It's important to identify strengths in the unborn infant's environment, but also any potential risks, so that parents can be offered the support they need. Early intervention is so important when it comes to identifying risks to father's mental health and infant mental health. Early detective and effective intervention yield better outcomes. And finally, with greater attention to the importance of fatherhood and more support for fathers, we could give many more children, whatever their family background and circumstances, a better and healthier start in life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim. I'm just trying to switch my camera back on again. I'm failing miserably. There we are. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. I've seen some really interesting questions in there that we'll get to at the end. But again, just to remind you to pop any questions that you have. I'm sure Dawn is reading my mind because that's something that I would like to bring up at the end as well. So thank you very much for that, Kim. And as Kim referred to, the next part of the webinar is moving on to the team from Supporting Dads in Blaenau Gwent. And they're going to provide us with an insight as to the work that they're doing with over 70 fathers. An impressive figure, Gareth.
Yeah, and growing all the time.
Good.
I think Tan, you're going to share.
Yeah, I am going to
the
share.
presentation. Fab.
Sorry, I've had to move rooms in between, so
The joys of working.
I know. Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, fab. So yeah, we'll get started. Obviously, it's been fascinating to hear the previous presentations and how the information links up with the picture that we're seeing in Blaenau Gwent. So just as a very brief introduction as to who we are and why we're in place. Obviously, similar to the Sure Start and other programs, the main project in Blaenau Gwent in similarity is the Flying Start project. Prior to COVID, I believe there was kind of like a Welsh government review of how their project was performing, and you know, they had thumbs up across the board, A+, but the question was posed, what were they doing to engage with fathers? And as we've heard from previous presentations, due to the service being largely women, women for women service, there wasn't an awful lot of engagement going on. So management at the time decided to advertise for a post where they would employ a man to start to bridge that gap. And that's when I first came into post. Luckily, after the first 18 months of providing that support in Blaenau Gwent, there was a massive uptake, huge engagement. And even though we were only engaging with Flying Start specific families, so 0 to 4 in specific postcodes, then seeking alternative funding allowed us to expand that provision and now provide it to all fathers across the Blaenau Gwent area. So we'll quickly run through kind of what it is we're doing to address some of the issues mentioned in the previous presentations, and hopefully plug some of the gaps, I suppose. So what was so interesting to me previously with Richard and Eleanor's presentation is that the findings that you know, the presentation showed is completely reflected in the services and support that the fathers are asking us to provide them with. So some of the evidence-based parenting programs we have been trained in, Circular Security, Grown Brain, IY, Nurture program. Those are kind of like programs that we support fathers with. There's obviously a massive push on speech and language, and you know some of the programs that mothers have previously been able to access, fathers now being able to access those similar things. This is well documented, the increase in delayed language and speech due to the pandemic, and you know that's a big part of the picture that we're seeing. No surprise and no secret to a lot of the fathers that we're working with suffering with their mental health. We've developed in conjunction with the perinatal mental health team. We put in place kind of like a pathway where we have you know, specific questions that we will ask fathers, making sure that they got, you know, the support they need from their GP or other medical professionals. And if they are not receiving that support, we'll run through the it's the GAD question. I forget what it's called.
Yeah.
The GAD2 is the kind of like assessment that we'll go through with them, and then as a result of that assessment, we'll find out what support they need. So obviously that's massive on our agenda, because I can't remember the percentage. It's changed all the time. There's a massive percentage of the dads we engage with who report.
I think it's about 80% at the moment, Gar.
80, yeah, around that figure. It's a massive percentage. Obviously, as previously mentioned through Kim's presentation as well, you know, the links between employment and mental health massive, and unemployment in Blaenau Gwent continues to remain a massive issue since the likes of the closing of many factories, closing of the steelworks, etc. So we work very closely with the Department of Work and Pensions and some of the re-employment programs like Communities for Work, Bridges into Work, make sure that we refer fathers into these programs. Again, poverty, as has been mentioned previously, is major concern for a lot of families that we work with. So we work to make sure that the fathers they're engaging with, if they're not in employment, are receiving all the benefits that they're entitled to and are aware of everything else that is out there for them to access. So some of the organisations we work with would include Citizens Advice Bureau, Smart Money Cymru, for things along the lines of you know, less kind of like impactful loans and things like this for the family that they work with.
I see this element massively increasing as well with the cost of living crisis. You know, I think our families that are living in poverty are going to be plunged further into poverty. So I think this is something that we'll be focusing on over the next couple of months.
Yeah, it's very high on the agenda for the dads that come in and speak to us. Socialising, as previously mentioned, there is opportunity for us to bring dads together in a dads only environment. We've done that we've attempted it in numerous different avenues, some successful, some not as successful, but some of the ones that have been successful we'll show you a little bit of later. We've had dads only swimming groups where, you know, we've had 3 generations, grandfathers, fathers and not fours in the pool at the same time, which has been kind of a pleasure to see, and we've had massive positive reports back from the fathers that they've worked with us on that. Getting out more. So one of the things that we are blessed with in Blaenau Gwent is a number of, you know, obviously beautiful mountains and nature. We've taken dads on like nature walks, things around Brimback Park, Aberglery Lakes, and loads of different local areas, introducing dads to these areas. Bit of a struggle now this time of year with the weather, but we are, you know, making sure that we're getting dads out and about. Running coffee mornings, again with no set agenda as to what we're there to discuss or to do, just to give dads that space to offload and speak to other dads who are in similar situations to them. And the most recent kind of project that we've run was in collaboration with the perinatal mental health team, where we were bringing in specialist support to basically exactly what Kim was mentioning earlier, make it open to dads that, you know, perinatal mental health is, you know, it is a thing, and you know, if you're experiencing these things, maybe these are people we need to talk to, and this is the support that's available to you. So opening doors where maybe in the past they wouldn't have even known those doors were there, let alone that they could have been closed. A big part of what we do, we receive a massive number of referrals from social services or Families First services. So those could be due to kind of like domestic violence or reported issues in the home. So these are not necessarily bespoke courses that we run, but there are kind of like specific tools that we will use and guided conversations around relationships, interpersonal relationships between mother and father, Obviously, we know that a lot of the problems arise due to what we've previously mentioned, like things like stress about finances, health and well-being, mental health, the stresses of parenting. We know why the parental conflict is there, but it's making parents aware of why that is, and what they can do to kind of improve that situation at home. So a couple of those tools that we use is like Both Parents Matter we refer into. How to Argue Better is a little kind of like program that we would use with families to kind of work through that, and advocating for fathers as well, where they're involved in things like child protection arena. They can often be the only male in a room of many female workers, and be uncomfortable with some of the questions that are being raised, not confident about what they want to get from the meetings. So we work with them to kind of like on their behalf in those meetings as well. And finally, one of the main issues that we struggle with in Blaenau Gwent is there is unbelievable housing crisis, where access to suitable housing is just not available, and the cost of private housing is not attainable for a lot of the families that we work with. So we are working very closely with the local housing associations and the homeless charities that are available to us, to make sure that the fathers that we work with, talking about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they need to be in a safe and secure home first. And a lot of the dads that we're working with are at risk of homelessness and are not in that environment. So we're looking to really kind of push on making sure that the dads that we work with and the families that we work with are in secure and safe housing as well. So that kind of links in to the presentations we've seen earlier, and obviously exactly what we're seeing is what the dads are asking us for help with on the main part, really. Which slide is here we go. So this is literally just the way in which we promote the service. So luckily I've worked within the support and change team for social services previously, so we've got good links with local authority and the locality teams of social services in Blaenau Gwent. We were based within the Flying Start team, so we obviously have fantastic links with the health visiting team, the family support workers, and that basically generates the majority of our referrals in. The support is open to any father in the borough, so we have advertised in the libraries and the doctor's surgeries. We do advertise on social media, although in the way that we make sure we don't get too overflowed, because we have due to the nature of referrals in, we have access to things like COVID funding to take on more staff to deal with the demand of the number of fathers coming in to ask for support. Are you going to take this one, Tan? So just
I can do. So we have a range of referrals received. So just to let you know, we have a bit of a mix and match of funding. The original posts were legacy funded, and then we had the early help funding then, which is the COVID recovery money, and we've managed to have 3 dad support workers. Obviously, funding is always vulnerable, and for us, we want to push for that equality and streamlining that funding, so it's not kind of an afterthought that we have dad support workers in, and then it's a main part of our service. And I think the project in Blaenau Gwent is a testament, really. I mean, we've had 161 referrals to date. We've had more than that again now. This was done last term, and the referrals come in then. By the nature of the referrals, they come in and they have very complex needs. So they'll have a range of housing, child protection issues, relationship breakdown, etc. And because it's a referred in service, we do have dads having self-referrals. So it's kind of that light touch support. But the majority, I would say probably 95% of them are, dads with complex needs. So referrals received come in from a range from health visitors, family support workers. We work really closely with our Families First team. We're an integral part of social services. So we get lots of referrals in from social services and social workers. Communities for Work, we work quite closely with as well. So the referrals that come in, there's just a range. You never know what's coming in through the door, which is great, really, because it keeps the project exciting, and knowing that we are supporting fathers. And I think the more word gets out, that the support is available, and the more referrals that we get in, so we have a really good engagement rate as well. So outcomes achieved then term 1. So this came from our term 1 report. So 161 fathers have been referred into the project and engaged. 9 families no longer require social services intervention. Again, we see that as a really big success story. I mean, obviously we can't take credit just for that, because we work as part of a multi-agency team. But I think, you know, listening to Kim's presentation in particular, you know, about how important it is to have fathers involved in this process. And I think it makes a massive difference. And we've had some success in families no longer requiring social services intervention, and are become really self-sufficient as a family, which is fantastic. So we support dads into access training, employment support, etc. 19 dads have gone back into work. 20 dads have been supported with financial debt. Debt is a huge issue within the borough, and like I said, only set to get worse, I think, with the fuel and food crisis. 30 dads have been supported to reunite with their children. The reunification of children and their fathers, that is, I think that's increasing. Gar, do you agree? I mean, we work with you know, Both Parents Matter and people like that, then that can support that. But you know, again, very often dads are, oh well, you can't have contact with the children. Well, you know, and we are there to support dads to challenge that decision. Prevention of homelessness. 80% of dads reported a positive improvement in their mental health. 100% of dads have increased awareness of ACEs, so that's introduced and drip fed right throughout all the support. There've been 435 one-to-one home visits complete and 181 community interventions. Do you want to take this one, Gap?
Yeah, no problem. So this is just to break it up a little bit now, because I know we've spoke quite a lot. Just a quick video of one of the groups that we have been running in Abertillery in partnership with an Iron Bevan Leisure Trust and the family support workers. So it'll give you a picture and a flavour of kind of what we're doing. So yeah, it's I know it's a very cheerful little video, but obviously I think it can be quite easy to look sometimes at the stats of what we're doing. But you know, when you see it like that, it kind of for me as well, it puts it into perspective. You know, those sessions is so valuable to both the children and the fathers, and I think that, you know, it gives you a good idea of kind of what it is we're doing. So more recently, we had a musician come into the hub in Cefn-Gola. This was done on weekends. And again, in partnership with the perinatal mental health team, where you know, just through you know, we've learned a lot about how dads engage, and you know, if we ask them to all come around and sing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and you know, it might be a little bit off-putting for them, but you know, if you kind of package it as, you know, we're going to explore music and instruments and we're going to create something, you know, it lends itself to better engagement. So we've it's just a couple of little snapshots there about the most recent group we've been running, which was attended quite well. We had seven lads and 7 and 6 dads on consecutive weekends. So that was really nice. There's some really positive outcomes from that as well. And this is something that's more of an ongoing thing that we run. Would be like the coffee mornings, where dads can just come and grab a biscuit and a coffee, and if they want to get things off their chest or just talk about how difficult their week has been, that's something that we do. And what tends to happen is that you know, we'll arrive at a topic, so something along the lines of the cost of living crisis, or did you know that this was available, did you know that that was available, or have you accessed this funding, or you know, we'll talk about things like that. Child safety is a big one. Big concern of fathers is you know, how they keep their child safe, children attending childcare settings in schools, and concerns and anxieties they have over this. And I think in sharing those anxieties, it's a massive benefit to them as fathers and as individuals. So they're very well attended and very positive sessions also. So again, we are blessed in Blaenau y Gwent with a number of beautiful nature walks and a bunch of lovely locations. So that's something that we try to do, particularly in the summer months. Is something that we might have to think about now. Maybe funding for some umbrellas, Tam. We'll talk about that later.
Okay,
But,
we'll have a chat.
But yeah, so this is something which has been very valuable. Dads have reported massive increases in their mental health in terms of getting out more, having someone to motivate them to get up and get out, and having a time and a place to be somewhere. And you know, we've run these sessions where dads will talk from the start to the end, and we've also had them where dads will just walk side by side, and you know, again, both have been kind of like positive influences as well.
And for us then, I mean, obviously for the ones that hold the purse strings that are on this meeting, you know, we have to measure outcomes and we have to evidence, you know, what kind of outcomes we're achieving with dads and with the project. So what we did, we developed a baseline assessment tool. This is quite new. It's quite a new tool. I think we're on the second term now of actually using it. It contains 14 sections, and as you can see down the bottom there, it's you know, housing needs, engaging a focus group, relationships and social inclusion, practical support, etc. Each of those 14 sections then will have their own outcomes. And what we were finding was the previous tools that we used wasn't really fitting what we needed to measure. So these outcomes then directly report then into you know, our legacy funding outcomes and the early help funding then as well. So it's kind of a win-win situation for us. But it's an individual based on assessment tool for that individual father and what their needs are. So you might be doing a parenting program with them on a one-to-one. You might be supporting with our relationship breakdown. You know, it could be that reunification with their children, and there's a section on each of this based on assessment tool. Then there's a section to measure each of those outcomes then, and it is working really well at the moment, and hopefully the plan is that you know, we're going to be able to identify trends. So looking at this one, this was for term 1 report, which was 1st of April to the 31st of August, and as you can see there, improving mental health and well-being, which we would fully expect really. Supporting financial stress and worry was another, and then positive parenting and engaged in a focus group. What we can do then is look at maybe geographical outcomes there as well. So looking, are there specific needs in certain areas? You know, there's lots that we can unpick from this. So, you know, we are quite excited about, well, I'm quite excited about it because I like a graph, don't I, Gav?
Yeah, she's
And that's
heavy.
And that's an example, like the reducing parental conflict and interparental relationships. So that's an example of the before and after scores, measures, and the kind of questions that we ask then. It's kind of amalgamation of lots of different evaluation tools out there.
What we learned very quickly, and this was before COVID, is that going in with kind of our own agenda to meet our own outcomes didn't work very well. So the way that we work is, you know, collaborative communication approach, where we, you know, focus on the relationship with the father. The work that we've done with PIMS has, you know, just told us about the benefits of therapeutic relationships, and building those relationships gives these fathers the opportunity to kind of talk to us about what matters most to them. And that is how we kind of like work, is just building that relationship, discussing what matters most to them, and focusing on the priorities for that father as an individual. So that's kind of how we work.
Yeah, the referral could come in for something very different to what the father's actual needs are. And right at the beginning of our baseline assessment tool, there's a decision-making quadrant. and we look at that and the heart of the matter tool to find out what's really going on for dads and how we can support. This is just some feedback that was shared during the last report. We'll just leave you to read that. We'll read that out for you. We'll give you a minute or so to read through those.
I was immediately thinking of the families which these come from, and obviously it's really nice to be having that positive feedback as well as the kind of like the evidence that it's working. So
yeah,
ticking both boxes.
Future plans then. I mean, for us, the dad support workers have been really proactive and engaging lots of other dad support workers and significant other workers throughout Wales, really. So we're looking at setting up a networking meeting. I think that's in place now for January, isn't it?
January, yeah.
So you know, and again, it's about sharing good practice. You know, if there's something that we've already done and established, we happily would share that with the other authorities, and hopefully, you know, we'll start making a real platform for dads and getting that quality of service. Like I said earlier, it's about securing funding, streamlining the project, so that it's not just an afterthought. Oh, we have a bit of money left over. Or there's underspend in this pot. We want it as part of our core services. Linking with the parent and infant mental health service, the primary mental health service as well, GPs, early intervention as opposed to crisis management. So looking at the, you know, supporting dads before, you know, we have a referral and saying dad attempted suicide 2 weeks before. So that's kind of going to be a focus for us going into next year. Continuing to advocate for fathers and male role models to ensure an inclusive service and equality for fathers, as I said, as parents throughout Blaenau Gwent and across Wales. And like I said, I think there's enough pockets out there for us to be able to get together and create that platform to really start streamlining these dad services throughout Wales.
Last video.
Yeah. This is just the last video now. One of our dads that was involved in one of the walking groups and receives lots of one-to-one as well. It's only a few minutes, but this kind of finishes off our presentation.
I've been obviously working with Steve now for a year now, coming up about a year now, and been really helpful. Now introducing going out walking and all that now, so there's different things where we can adjust, where we can talk with different dads, relating then to obviously our ups and downs really, and our where we going, obviously where we going wrong, and seeing if talking to like-minded dads, if they've had the same things or to help different things. But yeah, this dad support group has helped me along the way through difficult times really, and hopefully there's stuff now in the future where we can progress now with the goals, setting little goals, and for the support that is out there. And I gotta say, I've never been one to talk, but I gotta say, you've gotta talk, you've gotta express, and talking to different people, different groups, your support networks, they are out there. Yes, please talk, really.
Even then, top guy.
Wow. Inspirational, I think, is one of the words that I would use there. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to steal a lot of those ideas because I know that that's an area that we need to be thinking about developing. So thank you very much for sharing that. There are quite a few comments there as well in the chat box about that, but thank you ever so much, and thank you for ending on a positive. I think it was really nice to see the videos and the views of actual the fathers themselves. That was brilliant. Lovely. Thank you ever so much.